We have had a number of significant events in recent weeks. The President's visit to Ukraine, President Zelensky's visit to London, and last week we had the Secretary General of NATO confirming President Biden's prediction that this will be a long war. And I wonder if I could just start by asking you, what alternative scenarios can you envisage for the outcome of this war that would be acceptable? And in particular, can you envisage any acceptable circumstances which would leave Russia in possession of any occupied Ukrainian territory as part of a peace settlement?
Well, thank you for having me, Sir Bernard, and I will do my best to keep the answer short so we can indeed end on time and get everyone in. Quickly on Ukraine, I think the simple answer to your question ultimately is it's for Ukraine to decide what is acceptable to them. It's not for anyone else to dictate to Ukraine. Our job, as I see it, is to put them in the strongest possible position to have that conversation at a time of their choosing, to ensure that they can win this conflict. And in the immediate term, my priority has been to accelerate and intensify our support to Ukraine with the provision of particular capabilities to ensure that they can have decisive advantage on the battlefield over the coming months. And that's what our allies, I also know, are committed to do. I spoke to President Biden about that, and indeed President Macron when I saw them recently. We're all aligned on that strategy. We've taken a lead, in fact, in that strategy in the UK, and that's what the priority is for now.
That would seem to be a no to the answer in that case, that if it's up to Ukraine, and Ukraine made it view plain that they want Crimea back as well, we would back them on that.
Again, this is for Ukraine to decide. Our job is to put them in the strongest possible position to have those conversations at a time that is appropriate.
Second, the budget allocated extra money for defence, which I think the vast majority of people most welcome, but most of this vital support has gone to support the MOD nuclear enterprise. Ukraine urgently needs increased supplies of weapons and ammunition if it is to hold the current Russian offensive and to drive Russia from its territory. The Secretary General of NATO has warned that the whole of Europe needs to replenish and renew weapons and munition stocks and supply chains to support the long war in Ukraine. So can you explain, please, Prime Minister, how will the UK increase its weapons and munitions acquisition so as both to replenish our national essential stocks and simultaneously maintain supplies to Ukraine at the rate which they are needed?
Well, there's two separate things, Sir Bernard. One is the support we give to Ukraine that is incremental to the MOD's budget. There was $2.3 billion last year, and again this year we've said we will meet or exceed that same amount. So that's the support we're providing, second only to the United States in terms of the military support that we're giving Ukraine. And then the MOD's budget was increased by £5 billion at the budget, and that came on top of the £560 million uplift that they received at the autumn statement. The breakdown of the five is 3 for broadly the nuclear enterprise and 2 for stockpiles and munitions, coming on top, as I said, of the £500 million at the autumn statement, and something that I know the Defence Secretary warmly welcomed at the time.
But the money so far allocated does not replenish the stocks we've already given to Ukraine and does not reinvigorate our supply chains in order to support the supply of weapons needed to both replenish our own stocks and to continue supplying Ukraine.
So we are doing both. We are providing extra financial support, as I said, second only to the Americans last year, and this directly to Ukraine. We are simultaneously increasing the MOD's budget, both to strengthen its nuclear enterprise and to increase our own stockpiles. I would make the general observation as well. I wouldn't necessarily see it as a negative that our own stockpiles have been drawn down, for the simple fact that if you think about what are those weapons for, I mean, they were ultimately there to degrade and deter primarily a Russian aggression. They are being used to do exactly that. They're just being used by the Ukrainians. So in one sense, even though the stockpiles are lower, they are being used for the purpose with which they are intended and degrading the capabilities of an adversary in the process. So yes, we will rebuild them over time. Really the constraint is the supply chain capacity, which is not something that we alone face. All our European partners face the same supply chain constraints, and that's something that we are all collectively grappling with. But the money's been put in, as I said, incrementally for the MOD on top of the money for Ukraine.
Finally, Prime Minister, my last question in this thread. There was a very notable Sino-Russian summit last week. What conclusions should we draw from this summit? And I don't think you've said anything about this yet.
So, my observations on it are, whilst we welcomed and I did welcome China's support for Ukraine's territorial integrity as part of the various things that they said, I think their abstention on voting for a resolution, does little for their credibility as a neutral party in this. I'd encourage President Xi, as we've said, to engage directly with President Zelenskyy on any particular peace proposal that China is interested in putting forward, and that exactly is a conversation I've had with President Zelenskyy as well. China would do well to engage directly with Ukraine on that. More broadly, it's clear that Russia is dependent on China for various reasons that are obvious, and again would ask President Xi to use his influence with Putin to urge him to end this war and withdraw from Ukraine as a precondition to any negotiations.
You're not supporting China's request for a ceasefire?
No, rather the opposite. As I said, there were various points in their peace proposal. Their support for Ukraine's territorial integrity is indeed welcome, but as I said, their actions elsewhere and the other things they said, as I said, undermine their credibility as being a neutral party in this. And I said we were, as we have urged with colleagues, other countries, for China not to supply Russia with weapons and to ask them to use their influence with Russia to try and bring an end to this conflict.